Students, welcome again in our class of English literature for BA final year students. And today we are continuing the remaining part of the poem Ode to the West Wind. And here in the fourth canto of this Terza Rima lines, we proceed today. If I were a dead leaf thou mightest bear, if I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, a wave to pant beneath thy power, and share the impulse of thy strength, only less free than thou, O uncontrollable. If even I were as in my boyhood, and could be the comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, as then, when to outstrip thy sky speed scarce seemed a vision, I would never have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. A heavy weight of hours has chained and bound one true like thee, tameless and swift and proud. So, here in this section of the poem, we find the poet Shelley becomes subjective, which is a very important romantic quality. Subjectivity is a romantic quality. And he says, and starts with if I were. So, here is a wish, and here is a sense of loss as well. If I were a dead leaf, thou mightest bear. If I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, a wave to pant beneath thy power. The things which he has described in the previous three sections. In the very first, he has described about the effects of west wind on earth and how there were dead leaves, pestilence-stricken multitudes, black and red and pale and hectic red. So, he says, if I were like the leaves which I have described in the previous lines. And in the second part, he has described about the clouds and of that vast tree whose leaves are falling, and those leaves are falling in the sky, and it seems that the clouds are falling like the leaves. So he connects with the second part, and he wishes that if I were that swift cloud to fly with thee. And then, when in the third part he describes about the effect of the west wind on water, and he wishes to be a wave of that ocean, of that water, to pant beneath thy power and share the impulse of thy strength. So, with being a leaf, a cloud, or a wave, he could have shared the strength of the west wind, and he yearns or desires to be like those clouds or leaves or waves, and sharing the strength and power of the west wind, only less free than only thou, O uncontrollable, if even I were as in my boyhood. So, he says that in that manner I could have been as free as the west wind and could have enjoyed unlimited freedom. But here is a sense of loss since he doesn't have such power and strength and comradeship of west wind, so he doesn't feel himself to be free, and he feels himself to be in the shackles of life. The poet too has a sense of freedom, and he wishes to have a sense of freedom, though he is not as free as the west wind. And then the poet recalls, if even I were as me in my boyhood. He recalls his boyhood and could be the comrade of the wanderings over heaven. Then, as in his boyhood, when he could surpass the west wind in speed, and when he could easily accompany it in its upward flight. So he recalls his boyhood and could be the comrade or companion of the wanderings over heaven, or the wanderings of the west wind over heaven, means in sky, as then went to outstrip the sky speed, and who could in his boyhood and in his days of zeal and enthusiasm, he had that power to outstrip the sky speed of the west wind. And since he doesn't possess such vigor and power, so he is at grief or at a sense of loss. His scars seemed a vision I would never have striven, as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. He would not have felt the need of seeking the help of the west wind in his present distress. But as he has lost his youthful vigor and fire, he is in need of help. He is in sore need. And he is praying to the west wind, to the powerful, to seek some sort of vigor and power and enthusiasm. As thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. Oh, and there his exclamation, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. Again, the connection is here of the waves, the leaves, or a cloud. So he wishes to be lifted like these things so that he could accompany the power of the west wind and share the power of the west wind. I fall. And again, after this exclamation, here again an exclamatory line is here. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. And here, this note is very touching. And here he wishes and prays to the west wind. He has fallen on the thorns of life. Beautiful metaphor is used here. Means the tortures and turmoils of life have broken him, and he has fallen upon the thorns of life, and he is suffering and he bleeds. I bleed. This line, particular line, is an echo of Shelley's other poem, The Indian Serenade. There also he says in this manner that I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. And here he continues, a heavy weight of hours he chained and bowed. One true like thee, tameless and swift and proud. And he says that he appeals to the west wind to lift him as a leaf, a cloud, or a wave, because he has greatly suffered in life, and under the weight of his misfortunes, a heavy weight of ours, means weight of time which has passed, and misfortunes which has occurred to him, and he has suffered those misfortunes. A heavy weight of us, a chained and bowed, have chained him, and he has bowed before those misfortunes. One, two like thee, and they were too many. And once there was a time, one, two like thee, he used to be tameless and swift and proud, but he wails over the loss of his fearlessness and his being swift and proud when he was young and full of vigor and enthusiasm and full of glory. Now he wails over the loss of those glorious days of his, and he means to say that, but now he feels bent and oppressed by the sorrows and miseries and misfortunes and tortures and turmoils of life. So this particular part has a very pathetic note, which is also a romantic quality, sense of loss, pathetic note, and being subjective. The poet is subjective here in this section and concentrates on him and on the west wind, and how could the relationship between him and west wind have been, and how he was once tameless and swift and proud, and now he again yearns to get that tamelessness and power and vigor, and he is in his sore need, and he wishes to be lifted like a wave, a leaf, and a cloud. So these lines are very beautiful, and the metaphor used are also very beautiful. Thorns of life, a heavy weight of ours, a chained and bowed. Again and again we read these lines, we find a better understanding and a mingling of ourselves with Shelley and the West Wind. So, students, you just go through these lines at home and try to interpret and listen this chapter which I have dealt through this YouTube channel, and then try to understand and make notes. Very important thing to make notes and try to establish the relation between the west wind and the poet, and how the poet wants to be a comrade of the west wind's sky speed, and how he had done so in the so previously. So students, enjoy these lines at home. Thank you very much.